Hi, I'm KS Garner, and you're listening to the Solo Nerdwood podcast. Today, I'll be speaking with co-editors Chris Lawson and Aubrey Lyn Jeppson here to promote their upcoming Kickstarter anthology, Scott Snyder Presents Tales from the Cloakroom. Welcome, Chris. Welcome, Aubrey.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm hanging in there. It's Monday. It's Monday, isn't it? It is Monday.
It is Monday. I feel that in my soul. Is it Monday?
Yeah, I have no idea what day it is anymore. But outside my introduction, who is Chris Lawson and Aubrey Lyn Jeppson in their own words?
Go for it, Aubrey.
Okay. I am a comics editor and writer. I also do a little bit of graphic design, and I'm learning how to letter comics. My favorite thing to do is help people make their work better. I love working with people and helping them, inspire them to be better creators and improve their stories. Cause I've never had something come across my desk that was so bad that it couldn't be amazing. And so I just love working with people and helping them hone their craft.
And I'm Chris Lawson. I write under CK Lawson. I just now started getting into comics writing the last 6 months or so, with pitch submissions to anthologies and things like that. And I've been involved with this project since about October of last year. As far as my life, I am non-binary, I'm queer, I'm disabled, and every second I get a chance to, I will talk incessantly about my dogs. And that's pretty much me. So.
Oh, there's mine outside. Okay. Well, what is Tales from the Cloakroom anthology about?
So it's a 120-page multi-genre anthology. Basically, we were all brought together we all signed up for Scott Snyder's Substack, which is he offers these writing courses once a month, where he talks about a various concept, 3-act structure, how to pitch, what things not to do when you get into the industry and things like that. And early on, Joji Shuster, the creator of the project, came up with the idea that, hey, let's put something together. And then he started bringing on board people that he thought could really help out. Ben O'Grady, the other co-editor. And then Aubrey and I came in a little bit after that. She was brought on first as a story consultant and then moved on to more responsibilities. And I just kind of piggybacked off her because I was really intrigued with what she was doing and wanted to learn. So she's been an excellent teacher, like she says, always improving other people. As far as the genres, we connected everything with just saying, write a story that includes a jacket. What does a jacket make you think about? And that ranges greatly from, sci-fi adventures with like a space corps that wear jackets as uniforms, to say my personal story that's just about how the scent on clothing can remind you both of bittersweet memories and tragedy and loss and also joyous moments with someone who you've lost. And so it ranges greatly in genres with that just kind of connecting through line of jackets.
Yeah, I read the preview that you sent me, and the one with the scent of the jacket really got me with the dog, because I'm actually wearing my grandmother's sweater right now because it reminds me of her, like it has her perfume on there. So yeah, that one really got me. I had to
It was the same for me.
Yeah.
My dad passed in 2006, and I still have some of his sweaters and trench coats. And when I read that immediately, I was like, oh, that connected so well, the same way with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. People either really love it or really hate it, but at least I got emotion out of it, so I'm good. Well, some people don't like to cry. So.
I think that was more of it. They liked it, or they were upset that they were crying, not that they hated it. Yeah.
So. Yeah, when I read it, I was expecting it to be the other way around, not what it ended up being. So I think that's what hit me more. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but that's what hit me more is when you find out what actually happens in the end.
Yeah, there's a nice twist to it there's a nice twist to it. So it's not what people are expecting when they start. Oh, and another thing about it is we did really try to push for bolstering underrepresented communities. So we have at least 50% of our creators are 2S LGBTQI plus, female, or Black, Indigenous, people of color, or differently abled like myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris, you touched on it a little bit, but can either of you, if you'd like, can you elaborate on your creative process on Tales from the Cloakroom as a whole, maybe? So,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, you all are like pretty much everyone are students from Scott Snyder's comics writing class, right? So, how involved were you two in the creative process? I guess as editors, or even maybe you gave some advice on lettering or how things were laid out on the page. But as a whole, can you, I guess, elaborate on the process?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So I initially, like Chris said, I came on as a story consultant, and I was just gonna be in the scripts, giving them feedback, and creating a peer editing system. So we did have them edit each other as well. I've been writing and editing for about 10 years, and I've been trying to get into comics on and off for about that 10 years, and I've taken some classes on comics editing. So there came a point where it just kind of was like, okay, let's just do this to the end stage. And being an editor in comics is different than like being a book editor where you just edit, the prose. You do look at stuff like that. Like we had a system where like me and Chris and the other editors participated too, where they were able on giving rounds of feedback to every single script. And then they also got peer feedback if the peers chose to participate in the feedback system. And then once the scripts were really good and ready to go to art, they went and found their own artists, colorists, letterers. They went and found their creative team. And then as they got those pages finished, they brought them back to us. And then Chris did a ton of the proofreading, and we'd look at the art. We'd make sure that the bubbles were placed correctly. We did have a few, and this happens even with people I've worked with who have been in comics a little bit longer, but you'll still have people who put bubbles in weird spots and it doesn't flow correctly. So making sure everything looks as professional as possible by the time we get done with everything. So we had every stage that you would typically have on editing an indie comic, like editing the script and then looking at the art and making sure the art is the way it needs to be. And I think they all turned out really well in the end because of all the work that went into making sure the stories made sense and that they hit the right points and had the right I'm missing the word in my brain, but like hit the right beats. That's the word I'm looking for. So yeah, I don't know, Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
I will say, as far as if are you asking about maybe a personal creative process, KS, or more oriented toward the anthology?
It can be either. I mean, just whatever, I guess, your creative process personally that you brought in or that you may have learned from the anthology.
Okay, gotcha. So with me, one of the big things about my creative process is I think it's important for every writer out there that we've discovered is not kind of used to this, is to always have an editor look at everything you do. I've been lucky enough I didn't get really serious about comics writing until this class kind of was the catalyst. And I have pitched 4 things, and Aubrey was my editor on all 4, and all 4 got in. And sometimes she was like, tweak a little, and another time she was like, maybe you should like reconsider, take your theme, but retweak it really nicely, just saying maybe go back to the beginning. And I think that's important for everybody that is wanting to get involved with comics, is that you've got to be open to feedback. Thankfully, we had a really great team. We've become a really little family on Discord, and they've all been really supportive and really open to our feedback for the most part. And I can't praise Aubrey enough. She's an excellent editor, and she has a really great eye because she's got graphic design experience and because she has lettering experience now. She has a really great eye for catching things as an overall picture. And so my creative process just kind of is being tweaked as I learn from the class, is being tweaked as I learn from Aubrey, both in terms of like, everybody sees a story from from a different perspective. So I see it differently from being socialized as male or being queer or being disabled. And Aubrey brings in an eye that I don't notice about being film presenting and being, a woman, socialized woman. And so those kinds of things I think are really important to the creative process as well, to get another eye on projects, especially one that might not be, would be a perspective that you would not otherwise apply.
Were there any challenges with world building for this anthology, or I guess that you may have had previously that you learned and brought into this process, you know, maybe helping someone as, I guess, as an editor or as a graphic designer, bringing your expertise with, hey, you know, this won't work or this will work. And then as someone, as a writer, I guess taking that advice and applying it to the world that you're trying to build. So like, has there ever been any challenges with world building or no?
I can't think of any offhand. The other thing that you mentioned, like just like saying, hey, this doesn't work or this does work. Like, I took a class from Calisti years ago where she talked about how many words you could fit on a page. And I know she attributed that to other people like Alan Moore, Warren Ellis, and I have it written down over here, so I'm looking Ed Brubaker. But like, I had to like give them a lot of coaching about like, you can't put this many words in a panel because it won't fit. Because you can have a lot of experience writing and not realize like that translates very differently to a comic. But I'm trying to think, like we did, I think less so world building, but more strengthening voices. Cause there were times where we were like, hey, you've got to edit this up so that the voice of your comic is stronger rather than, because they were all pretty good about establishing their worlds. It's only 6 pages, so they didn't have a ton of runway for that. We do have some that have some really good world building. Especially I think our sci-fi stories have some really good world building for how little runway they had. But yeah, that was the main thing, is making sure, because we have brand new people to comics, and we have some people who have already published their own Kickstarters, so they kind of already knew the lingo. But yeah, giving them that, hey, and formatting scripts was another thing, because you know there's no general format for a comic script. Well, there's general formatting, but there's not one format. And so we had to kind of be like, okay, use some headers here. Make sure you use these kinds of page directions. That'll help make sure that it's clear for your artist. But yeah, those were the main hurdles we had to jump over as we were working.
And I would say as far as world building goes, like Aubrey said, since we were limited to 6 pages, some people were trying to use it as a jumping off point to other stories, like I'm going to make my own comic self-published later, and this could be a good jumping point. We were like, nah, this needs to be self-contained. It's fine if it leads into something. Like with Centiview, I've now created 3 other shorts that I've want to all put together eventually as its own comic, but these had to be standalone stories. We had one, kind of like Aubrey said, some were very plot driven, and so we had to tweak them to lean into voice and characterization and emotion more than here's a beautiful world that I've created, and they were indeed beautiful, but don't make your plot so big. You have to make this self-contained. There is no to be continued going on here. You can do that on your own later. This has to be able to stand on its own. And so we worked with a few creators as far as that goes with world building, just to make sure that this felt like a complete story. And it had elements where it might inspire you to do future stories along in that universe.
Yeah, I remember, like I said, I remember reading what you gave me, and it being limited to 6 pages, I think is a great way to learn how to do something when you're restricted on how to do something, because it's like, oh, these are all beautiful stories. And I think from like when you're trying to learn something new, you kind of jump in like head first, and you want to do as much as you can while you're there, but you can't really do that, as you explained, Chris. Like it has to be just this short, and that's it. It can go off to be something else, you know, later, but it can't be this story. It has to be something else. But as I said, I think when you're restricting, you have these really tight boundaries. When you're learning something, actually helps you more than if you had like free reign, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I quote to a lot of clients I work with, and I think I've said it to Chris, and I've said it to people on this project, that like Neil Gaiman compares short stories to like, it's like close-up magic, and you have to like, you have tighter, like you said, tighter constraints, and so you have to make it work rather than being on like a big stage with tigers or whatever, you know, like it's definitely it's building those muscles in a way that you can't with longer form stories. And I think it's really good for people starting out to start building those muscles. Like I've got probably, you know, 20 or 30 short scripts that didn't make it into stuff that are just sitting in my Google file folder, but it's all practice and it all helped me get better as a comics creator. So, yeah.
So I guess this is just pretty much like a follow-up to everything we just talked about. What advice would you offer to other creators? It can be editing, it can be in design, it can be in writing, whatever it is, creatively, that you wish someone would have told you when you first started. So it doesn't have to be this anthology. It can be the anthology or it can be something else, but you wish somebody would have told you when you first started out.
You want me to take the lead?
Go for
there?
it. I'm thinking.
Okay. One, like I said earlier, have an editor look at everything you do. It shouldn't be like a friend. It shouldn't be necessarily a writing peer that you're really close to. You need something objective. So get an editor to look at everything. I would say another thing, if you're starting out or even if you've self-published a few things, is don't clap back at feedback. Like it's there to help you. You don't have to like do everything that's recommended, but take that other voice into consideration and don't think that you're a perfect writer and you don't need any advice at all. I will say for me personally, and there's no way for me to do this at 40 blah blah years old, is I think like Aubrey is doing and like two of our creators, Alyssa Meyer and Bim McCrae did, is they understand other parts of the process. So they do their own art, they do their own coloring. Bim does his own lettering. Aubrey, has her class on lettering and now really helps in that regard. And of course, she has the graphic design experience. So I wish that I would have gotten in on learning those elements early, because it just gives you a totally different eye when it comes to putting everything together that I wish I had a more developed sense of.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing, like our process on this was to try to get everybody in that we could. And we've already discussed, like as an editorial team as a whole, like we'd probably change the submission process to have them pitch, because that's more like everybody here just thought, oh, I sent a script and I'm in. And like we did get most everyone in. There were a few that we worked with many hours to try to get in that just didn't quite make the cut. But like they were still interesting stories and I hope that they still publish them. But pitching is such a vital part of comics, like across the board, from indie comics to those short anthology pitches to like a full pitch doc that you're going to share with like Image or Marvel or DC or anybody. So we've talked a lot about pitching now with our group. We've had a couple of meetings where we went over it, but making sure your pitch doc is proofread and, tells the story fully. Cause like our feeling as writers is always to be like, oh, leave up mystery. Not if you're pitching to an editor, make sure you have the whole story so that they know exactly where you're going with things. And then I think from an editorial standpoint, managing my time a little bit better. I am so bad at like being like, let me do everything. I'll do everything. It's fine. You got to be willing to share with your team and let them help you out. And then also just saying, hey, this is something we can't get to, or we can't do this time, but we'll think about it next time. And I was going to say, actually, I'm taking the editing class that Shelley Bond's teaching right now. And she said exactly what Chris said, that like, it's important to understand as an editor, if you're planning to edit comics, figure out the different parts of the process, like figure out the basics of coloring, the basics of lettering, the basics of art. And I think that writers can benefit from that too, because then you'll know, I used to listen to Sean Crystal's podcast, and he talked about how don't write a page where you say there are 1,000 dolphins swimming towards the shoreline, because what artist has time to draw 1,000 dolphins? And that's just not something you would know unless you've taken the time to learn about the other parts of the comic process and what your collaborators go through. So I think those were some of the big lessons that I learned this time through.
And to piggyback off of that with two things. One, with us trying to get everyone into the anthology that wanted in, we gave them a lot of more attention than they should expect from, other editors. I think Aubrey has said before, she usually gives 2 rounds of editorial feedback. And we sometimes would do, 5 or 6 rounds because we wanted it to be as good as possible. And also the stories that are in the collection are very, very good. Like we were really impressed with the quality of the work. the caliber of the writing is, to me, on par with a lot of indie comics I've read. And you can definitely see, I can definitely see several of these creators becoming very popular in the next few years with their writing. There was something else I was going to say, and now it slipped my mind. Maybe it'll come to me later.
No, that's fine. I do it all the time. But throughout this whole process, did either of you, or do you even now get overwhelmed? Like, does it ever become too much? Like, and how do you typically manage your mental well-being when it does happen?
But just a deep sigh. You go ahead, Aubrey.
It is. So I think because comics editing is so different than any other kind of like editing in publishing, it is easy to become overwhelmed because you have so much to do, and like you're working with 20 different creators, and like everybody's sending you files. You have to make sure there's a system so that you can access all those files, and that like I had to tell the creators, hey, will you guys make sure that the most up-to-date versions of your comics are in your folders? Like, don't have extra files in there, because as I'm compiling, I don't want to have to sift through like old files and stuff, because that's gonna give me a chance to make an error. I might put the wrong page in. Like we have those rough proofs and those things that we're sending out to media right now, and like we don't want that to end up with a page that shouldn't be in there. And they're really good about this. Like we've said to them a few times, like, hey, remember, anything that happens that we have to deal with it times 20, because there's 20 different stories in the book. And they've been really good to like be like, oh yeah, okay, cool, we'll make your job as easy as possible. But it still can be overwhelming, and like just making sure, even as I'm compiling files for like rough proofs and stuff, like it's a lot to pile 20 stories into a book, and make sure everybody's in the right order and everything's where it should be. And there's definitely times when we were burnt out, like when we went back and forth with the scripts. Like Chris said, I do 2 rounds of editing with clients on scripts. And so going back 5 or 6 times is probably the wrong move, because by the time we were done with that we were pretty burnt out. I do think that the project got better for it, because like everything was so polished by the time it went to the art stage. But you just have to, I think the things I'm learning, and I've been learning this across my life, is it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be pretty good. And you've got to take breaks. And if you don't take breaks, your body will make you take breaks. You'll get sick, or you'll just want to sleep for 2 days. Those kinds of things.
Aubrey and I are both under the weather right now, because we're starting to get burnt out round 2. But to quantify things a little bit, and also KS, to build on your last question, the thing I forgot about the creative process, I highly suggest taking classes. Scott Snyder's class has been really good, from working from the foundations to inside the industry, little tidbits. Like I said, teaching you what not to do when you're trying to start out. He had some really comical stories along those lines. A class about pitching, a class about what am I trying to think of? Okay, well, you get my point. See, I'm already burnt out. I can hardly put my brain cells together right now. So I would say another part of the creative process, take these classes, especially from the professionals, and it helps a lot. But anyway, to quantify Aubrey a little bit there, the 2 of us realized we had put in 120 hours just on script review, and that is not normal. But we were just trying to make it so good. And I don't think even a lot of comics writers, unless they're maybe self-published, they don't understand the depth of the process. Like Aubrey said, it's times 20 for us. But in addition to that, not only are you reviewing scripts, not only are you checking the art and checking every single story's bleed area and copy safe area for the printers, trying to decide what printer to go with, analyzing, various paper qualities, things like that, having to be your own promoter. Because we are the ones that for the next month have to promote this hardcore to try to get published, which, I personally am a little worried about, just from the perspective of, since we have so many new writers, we don't have writers with huge followings that can like kind of bounce off each other. So we're going to be putting in a lot of work the next month for it. So you're really like a one-stop shop for everything. And especially with me being disabled, I've come to terms with that over the last 20 years, that I got about 3 hours max in a day before my body is done. And I can't even hardly think after that point. So it is very important to balance time, but Aubrey and I will admit, maybe struggle a little bit there. But that's nice about having a 4-person editorial team is, you know, one of them is going to take care of everything's printed and now we have to ship everything out. That's up to one of you, because Aubrey and I, we've done our part by then. And then in the next month, we also have Ben O'Grady taking responsibility for all of the marketing and social media. He is going to head that up. And with us, just maybe retweeting and quote tweeting and things like that. But putting it in somebody else's hands, you know, at different stages really helps you out.
I think having a good team is the main thing, and having a team that's willing to take the baton if you need them to is really good. And that's been really nice for us, is to be able to be like, here, you take it for a few days.
Well, my last question for you both is, what is your idea of success? I ask that because as creators, if we're not getting regular paychecks from a full-time job or making consistent revenue from our art, we're considered failures, or we'll consider ourselves failures. Many of us will put our dreams and projects on a back burner or give them up altogether, because this career path can be highly intimidating and competitive. So what is your idea of quote unquote success?
So you want to take it, Aubrey?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, you think, for me, you know, I keep saying this a lot, but with my disability, I've had 20 years to get used to that. So, you know, we have someone in our little writers community, and he messaged me every so often. He's like, do you not get nervous and anxious that you won't make it and you won't succeed? And I'm like, what do you mean you won't make it? You won't succeed? What do you consider success? And he was like, oh, I've got to write for Marvel or DC. And I'm like, but why? Why do you feel that way? Why do you feel like that means you're successful? And so for me, I've learned over time that now I'm pursuing writing because I've wanted to for 20 years. But for a long time, I got scared to do anything because I just felt like I couldn't push my body to handle it, because I am having to support myself with a part-time job just to make ends meet. And so I was lucky to find a good one, just that. So for decades, I've been like 2 decades now, I've been like, well, I can't take on more. And then finally, you know, when I hit that midlife crisis, I was like, no, the writing is my passion. That's the way that I want to leave a mark somehow. Even if it's just moving people, I've succeeded. So my goal is, while I would love to write certain titles at Marvel or DC, that is not success to me. I would love to have something through Boom or Image, but that doesn't mean that's not the only qualifier for success. For me, it's just, I have a story in my head. I want to get it on the paper. I want to collaborate with people that make it as beautiful as possible. I want to put it out into the world and have some people say that was damn good. And that's all. That to me is success.
Yeah, I think one thing I've thought about a lot lately is like the opportunities I have right now, I would have dreamed of 2 or 3 years ago. Like I have a dear friend who I check in with daily. She's a PhD, she has her own business, and like we keep comparing notes, and we're always stressed out, we're always overwhelmed, but like we keep looking at our paper, like what we have to do on our to-do list. And we're like, if I had thought about this 2 years ago, I would have thought this was a dream, even though I'm stressed out, like doing this, like doing a podcast, and we have a book that's coming out. Like those are things that I probably couldn't have fathomed 2 years ago even. And so to me, that's success. Would I love to eventually edit for any big company? That'd be amazing. Like I've learned from a lot of editors who have done that, like Andy Schmidt and Shelley Bond. I've taken classes from them. There'd be a great opportunity. But like, even if my career only is in indie comics and working directly with creators producing their own work, that'd be amazing. Like I love working with passionate people who are excited. And it's so easy to get burnt out and jaded, I think, as a creator. And so I just want to keep working with people who love what they're doing and appreciate my input. I think that's the main thing. So, yeah,
it's pretty much the same for me. It's just to work with as many people who are passionate about what they do, like as many of them as I possibly can. And this is probably the most stressed out I've ever been. And I mean, I've worked a full-time job and I've done this when I was working a full-time job. And I mean, it wasn't as bad then, but I couldn't have fathomed how much work I'm doing now 2-3 years ago when I first started it. And I wouldn't really have it any other way. I kind of feel like, I mean, it was nice to have the schedule. You know, you clock in at 8, you leave at 5, and that's what you do five times a week. But now I like that I get to pick my own schedule, and I like that I get to choose who I communicate with instead of just with clients that I had to speak with, even though I didn't want to, you know. So I'm rambling, but yeah, it's just to piggyback off of you. So
no, I feel exactly the same way. Like, it was funny before the pandemic, I had a friend who was like, well, you work from home, so you don't really work. And like, then during the pandemic, so many people ended up working from home and having to dictate more of their schedule. And like, there's a lot of weight with that people don't understand, that when you're dictating your own schedule, you have to make sure you wake up in the morning and that you're attentive to the tasks you need to do. You have to be so much more self-directed, and it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. I kind of miss being told what to do, but then I don't at the same time.
Especially when you're passionate about something, because you kind of don't want to stop. You like, I want to push, and then I'm like, uh-oh, I've gone too far and I got to back off. And so it's hard, especially finding that balance when you're so passionate about things. And it is weird. I've texted Aubrey about that before. It's like, this is such a weird feeling of, I'm so exhausted and sometimes upset and crying. And then, but at the same time, I'm really happy because we're producing something that we love so much. And and I'm sure you can relate, Cass, it's such a weird feeling of, oh my God, but then also, oh my God, that's great. So it's really weird.
Yeah, I actually had that feeling maybe a couple of hours ago. I was like, it's so much and I'm so tired. And I know that you mentioned that both of you were sick. I just got off like a cold. Like, I feel like my body forced me to take a rest for 2 days.
Exactly.
No, I was thinking of taking a break, but then I got hit up for another interview, for more interviews this week. And I was like, okay, I'll take them. And then I got sick, and like, I just could not physically, I just could not get out of the bed. My body forced me to take those 2 days, 2-3 days off. And like I said earlier, I was like, you know, kind of doubting myself in a way, like, what am I doing? You know, should I take a longer break, or should I try to do something else? Or, you know, what am I doing? But at the same time, it's like, I can't imagine going back and working for someone else and someone else telling me what to do. And, you know, telling me who I can't and can't talk to, telling me, you know, when I can have lunch, you know, stuff like that, or when I can spend time with my dogs or whatever it may be. So yeah, it's kind of, it's a weird feeling, but at the same time, I wouldn't change it for anything in the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly where I was on Saturday. I told the rest of the editorial team, hey, I'm going to take Monday off. And then I had a fever on Sunday. And so I still currently have a fever, but like and Chris was like, I can go do the show. It's fine. And I'm like, no, I'm going to rally for the hour or so that we do this. Cause like this is the fun part. The fun part is talking to people about this thing we've been working on for the last year. And so, yeah, same thing here. Like, I wouldn't trade it.
Well, I appreciate you both coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, can I ask you a question about maybe what made you fall in love with podcasting and why you feel passionate about it?
Well, okay, I started in August of 2019, and it initially started as me chronicling, or I don't know what the word would be, just pretty much cataloging in a way local events that happen here. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, Baltimore City. And I felt like there was a lot of things that were happening that a lot of people weren't talking about, in a way, kind of just like putting a spotlight on the local nerdy things that go on around town. Like we had a sci-fi fantasy convention that we've had maybe like the past 30 years, and a lot of people in like the nerd geeky community had no idea this thing was going on every single year. So that's one of the things that I kind of covered. And then when I worked in the office, I listened to podcasts since I can't really listen to music. And I'm like, oh, this would be really cool to just kind of like, it sounds weird, but talk to myself about it, because that's how I felt in the beginning. It was pretty much just talking to myself about like movies that I've watched, and I like the indie movies. I feel like a lot of people weren't talking about those. A lot of like anime shows or just TV shows in general that I feel like either a lot of people weren't focusing on, that wasn't like the major things. Because I felt like how many more Marvel or DC things can we all talk about? It doesn't work with me. And then a guy hit me up about helping to promote his Kickstarter. He is also an indie comics guy. His name is Calvin Chambers. And I was like, sure. And I was thinking, like, how am I going to do this? I didn't know how to do an interview with somebody. And he kind of just like forced me into it. And that's just something I kind of fell in love with ever since. Because my questions that I ask everyone comes from the perspective of another creator. You know, I went to school for graphic design. My dogs are barking. I don't know if you can hear them. I went to school for graphic design. I'm also like a self-published urban fantasy writer. I've written 2 books. Yeah, just as another creative trying to talk to other creators, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you're a very good interviewer, by the way.
Yeah.
You have excellent questions.
Yeah, like the mental health stuff is like I said, I'm currently in that space of like doubting myself and being overwhelmed a lot. And I'm just trying to get advice from other creators as well. Like, how do you all deal with it? Because I'm struggling with it as well.
Well, the other thing that when you said that right now, I thought of like imposter syndrome. And I think imposter syndrome is worse for people with marginalized identities, because like we're never sure we're going to enter a space. Like even I cosplay, and I cosplay with my husband, and I've had guys walk up to me and be like, do you really read comics? And I'm like, of course I do. Like, I spent 60 hours on this costume. Of course I do. And so, I don't know. The main thing I try to do is when I have that imposter syndrome is like talk to people around me who I know think I'm good and then let them cheer me on a little bit. Cause that'll help you kind of, at least for me, it helps short circuit the part of my brain that's like, I'm just bad at this. Why would anybody pay me to continue to do this? Cause it's just that weird voice in your head that just constantly comes back anytime you have a weak moment, but we're already doing it. And so I think that's comics is action, and so is being a comic creator. It's acting on what you're wanting to do.
Yeah, and another reason why I do this is I try to be encouraging to a lot of the indie creators I talk to, because a lot of them have really like extremely small, non-existent followings, and I'm like I'm the first person they've ever really spoken to about their work. So I try to make this as smooth as possible, and like I said, encouraging, and a bit of a safe space for them that they can, rant, ramble. People are so afraid about rambling. I'm like, no, this is your time to speak. Please ramble. Don't ever feel like I'm going to cut you off, or I try not to intercept too much into the interview like I am now. And I apologize for that.
I like it.
Great. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just try to make this little bit time for them to speak, because I feel like a lot of us don't feel comfortable or don't feel safe with speaking our minds about what it is that we're working on. So I try to make this however long it may be 15, 20 minutes, it can be an hour and a half, but this is your time to speak. That's how I try to make it for everyone.
That's really
and about that imposter syndrome Aubrey was talking about, that's what's been great about coming out of Scott Snyder's class, is this community that developed out of the anthology. Is we've had people post in there, I feel like right now that this is my art is crap or my writing is crap, and we just kind of really lift each other up and be like, no, you're good. Even with you just now, KS, with you speaking highly of the Sin of You, there's been many times where I've reached out to Aubrey and been like, my story's crap. And it was after like a dozen people told me it was good, but I was like, it's crap. I need to redo it. It's not good. I get one person saying, oh, it's okay. And suddenly that means it's just a disaster and I'm a horrible writer. And she's like, dude, calm down. And so it was very validating for you to be like, hey, I really like that story. So it's even the little nuggets of when you're getting burnt out, if you can get that person, that objective person to be like, dude, that was good. Like just now with you being such a good interviewer, I'm like, I need to make sure that KS knows that. And so I think that validation is really important.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I guess just one more thing, just to piggyback off of what you just said. I remember reading someone saying about how we think our work is crap because we did it. Like, we know that we did it. Whereas when we look at someone else's work, we're like, oh, that's good. It's because someone else did it and it wasn't us. So I guess you kind of have to look at it. You look at your work that way. Look at it as like someone else wrote it and not you. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It definitely does.
Was there anything else that either of you wanted to touch on about Tales from the Cloakroom as a whole that I may have missed? Like, do you know anything that's going to happen with the Kickstarter when it does launch? Like, do you know the rewards and like the other incentives that people are going to get?
Yeah. So we'll have kind of the basic stuff you expect from a comics Kickstarter. We'll have like a digital tier. We're going to have a cover and a variant cover. So we'll have some tiers for that. And I think we may work that in also as an add-on. We have a cover by Skylar Patridge and then Jesse Lonergan. And so they're both incredibly talented artists. I love the art on this book. It's just gorgeous. The stories, the covers, everything, the prints. So we'll have prints of those two covers. Plus we have a print by Sebastian Perez, and then also bookmarks, or a bookmark, and then a set of stickers that were designed by Rob Jones. Yeah, my brain just went blank for a second. Rob Jones did he did like the logo design and stuff for us as well. And so initially I was going to design the stickers for us. And then he came back with these 3 images of jackets that like fit the genres of the book. And it was just like, oh no, I don't have to design anything. We can just use what Rob made because it's just so good. So
we'll be launching on June 14th and going through July 16th. In addition to the digital and physical tiers, we'll have an early bird digital and physical if you get it within like the first 2 to 3 days. We're trying to decide between 48 hours and 72 hours at the moment. And then a tier with the stickers and the bookmark, a tier with the 3 prints to build off of what Aubrey said about the 3 prints, and the covers with Skylar Patridge. She's best known for Resonant and Trial of the Amazons. And she also has the upcoming Artemis from DC. Jesse Lonergan and Skylar is GLAAD nominated. Jesse Lonergan is best known for Hedra and is Eisner nominated, very talented. And Sebastian Perez is known for We Write Titans. They're all just so good. We were so lucky to persuade them to help us out. So we have those, and we'll have a retailer tier too to try to persuade or to try to get some local comic shops on boards. And that's another thing, to go back to something we talked about a while ago, is another thing we have to deal with is figuring out shipping for like a bajillion countries, to try to make a budget that's going to work, and a price point per book. And there are all these things that you don't even think about that you have to include in that price point. And so just again, to get to how much work goes into to the self-publishing, but those are reward tiers. I think that's all of them, isn't it, Aubrey?
I think so. Yeah.
And I guess the class with Scott Snyder, I did look at the website a little bit, but I guess like, how did you all like get involved, or do you know how other people can get involved in the class? Like, do you know if he's still accepting people? Like, how does that work?
Absolutely. So yeah, you can probably just Google Scott Snyder Substack, and you can join anytime. I think it's like $7 a month, and you'll get access to the backlog. So you can now sign up and get almost a year's worth of classes. There are various tiers. Like I do the annual tier, because if you do the annual tier, he also does this quarterly hangout where it's a little bit more intimate, where you can just pop in and ask him questions and get FaceTime with him. Otherwise, the classes, they are live. You can watch them after later on your own if you want, but they are live. So people are chatting and submitting questions to the assistant editor who's monitoring the chat, Tyler Jennis, and doing that part of it. And then he'll bring in guest lectures like Chip Zdarsky, James Tynion IV, his editor, Will Dennis, on the pitch lecture. And so you'll get access to all of that. And then there's also what they call a founders tier, where you can get really a lot of attention from Scott. You get to like go to a dinner at the comic conventions. I think the SDCC comic convention, if I'm not mistaken. You get to have a dinner with him and different things like that. So there are various tiers you can buy into. So even if you just wanted to pay the $7 just to get to watch all of the classes, you can come on board at any time and they're all there for you. And I highly suggest it. It's been really beneficial. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a Discord community for the class, which is how we all hooked up with each other, is everybody was chatting in the Discord, and that's how we all met. And then, of course, to not overwhelm that room, we set up our own little separate Discord for the anthology community.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like almost like a Patreon, but you get the lectures and stuff with it too, which sounds really cool.
Yeah, very similar format. Very similar.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank co-editors Chris Lawson and Aubrey Lyn Jeppson, here to promote their upcoming Kickstarter anthology, Scott Snyder Presents Tales from the Cloakroom. I highly recommend our listeners to give the Kickstarter a look, share, and buy if they can. All of Chris's, Aubrey's, and pretty much the collective socials and website will be listed in this episode's details for those who are interested. Again, I'm Kaya Skarner, and you have been listening to the Solo Nerdbird podcast. Thank you.